By far, one of the most challenging workplaces for citizens of the United States is the American military. Some of these challenges not only follow, but meet veterans in the civilian workforce. In honor of Veterans Day, we'll talk with two veterans about their experience in the civilian workplace on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Safety at work is more than freedom from physical injury. To be safe, you have to feel safe. Join us each week as we discuss psychologically healthy and safe work in the USA. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast episode. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and just the lives of our guests. We also seek to advocate strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. And today's episode, or this episode, whether you're watching it at day or night, is special because it's being released on Veterans Day. And I have to say, I did not serve in the U.S. military. Actually, as a member of the Fire Rescue Service, sometimes people would call us the domestic military, but it's not the same. And I wanted to get a couple of veterans that I know. And I have had the opportunity to have some conversation with, over the past couple of years to talk about, something that maybe folks wouldn't necessarily put together when we start talking about psychological health and safety. But I really do believe that those who serve our country are exposed to things that many of us have no idea. We've not experienced them ourselves. We don't know what it means to be in battle. We don't know. And in battle or not, just to be in a position to represent the country and to do things that are necessary for the security of our country is different. Again, I understand a little bit, being in the Fire Rescue Service, but I just don't think it was the same. So I wanted to get some folks who could really shed a little bit of light, and not only on what that was like, but also a little bit about what it's like to make that transition out here with the rest of us. and experiencing some of the things that we experience in the workplace, and to perhaps give us some thoughts and ideas. People talk about we need to support our military and all that type of thing. Well, supporting the military is not just about supporting the institution, it's about supporting the people. So with me today are, again, two friends that they actually have not met until now, but I know both of them. So I'm going to take the liberty to have them really meet one another. And we're going to start with Michael Carson. So Michael Carson, the way I start this off, I generally ask the question, who is, and then in this case, who is Michael Carson?
Thank you, Dave. Well, I don't know if I should call you Dr. Dave.
Whatever works, my brother, whatever works.
I'm Michael Carson. I wear a lot of hats. I've had a lot of roles over the years, but most importantly, I'm Michael Carson, who is a survivor of a number of things, who's an introvert, a person who's used his whole life, for the most part, to serve other people, and one who's always operated until I really didn't know how to describe it, but until probably 4 or 5 years ago, just someone who's operated and try to serve others from a standpoint of love. And a lot of that was rooted in my mom's upbringing, being raised by my mom and my dad. I was raised by two parents, but that's kind of who I am. I'll go into a little bit more about it, but some other hats that I wear. I'm a husband to Deborah Carson for more than 30 years, and I have 2 adult sons. And I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran. I served in the 80s in the States. for the U.S. Air Force, and that's where I learned my current career as paralegal, which I've been since the military.
Well, isn't that interesting that today we would end up having two veterans from slightly different generations, I would say, but they just happen to be in the same branch. Isaiah Hughes, we met, a year or so, maybe two ago, in a community group that we called here the Bridge, and just a fascinating young man. So, who is Isaiah Hughes?
Oh man, well, thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for extending the opportunity for me to sit down with both of you gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Uh, who is Isaiah Hughes? I am a native of Southwest Atlanta, um, the son of Kathy Patrice, raised by a single mother. In the absence of my biological father, my grandfather took the burden and the mantle of my father figure. That's something that I'll always cherish and hold dear. I hold him in very close regard to who I am as a man. He's responsible for a lot of that. Um, I've always been a man of passion, which is a blessing and a curse as far as temperament is concerned. Um, I've always felt that it was an honor to serve others. So I did Air Force JROTC in high school, Dunwoody High School, GA 944. And from there, I was blessed to earn a full scholarship to attend the Tuskegee University on a full ride there, full Air Force scholarship there. I was a cadet there, Detachment 015. And once I graduated from Tuskegee, I commissioned into the United States Air Force and I went to flight school to be a air weapons officer, 13 Bravo, 1 Bravo. I flew active duty, an AWACS, E3 Century there for about 4 years, mainly out of Kadena Air Base, Japan, and Okinawa, just PACAF. All over PACAF was my main battle area. But it's always been an honor. It's always something that I've cherished. And we'll get into this later into the conversation. But once I came home, I tried a regular job, a regular corporate position, and it wasn't fulfilling. Although the salary was competitive, it wasn't fulfilling because me serving, it was more than money. So I went back. I got my master's in policy. Then I taught economics in South Atlanta, taught high school economics for 3 years because it was always something that still is to this very moment now. Now I'm a strategy analyst for the United Negro College Fund. So I apologize, but I'm in the airport right now, traveling to JCSU in Charlotte. But serving others is something that I've accepted. I'm pretty much going to spend the rest of my life doing. It's always been something that gives me peace, and it's something that I will continue to do.
Oh, wow. Oh boy. Uh so so we're gonna go there in this conversation. It is just so interesting to hear again generational difference, but also similarity in terms of both of your upbringing. It sounds like in both cases, mom had a really significant impact on your life. I can say the same. Uh, Probably more similar to Isaiah than to Michael. You know, I'd never met my dad, so the only influence I really had was my mom. But it is really interesting how that influence causes or influences people to be a helper of others. I think that's interesting. So I want to put a pin in that because I think we may end up coming back to that whole the importance of serving others and why it is that we think maybe our moms are the drivers of us wanting to serve others. But before we get into that a little bit, I also tend to ask people if somebody stops you on the street, in this case it was me, and ask you when you hear the words or the phrase psychological health and safety, what does that conjure for you? I mean, and I'm not necessarily looking for an academic definition, but what does that mean when you hear psychological health and safety? What does that bring up for you? And why don't we start with back with Isaiah on this one? What's your thoughts when I say that phrase?
Uh, the first thought, as a disabled veteran who deals with PTSD and anxiety on a daily basis, um, the first term that I think of is sleeper agent. Sleeper agent. Because for me, especially who I am as a being and being so selfless, psychological health and safety is dangerous because, and I would argue this takes place more so on men, and I'm not trying to make it sexist, but it's about the upbringing. Being a black man born in the inner city, you kind of have this shield around you at all times. You don't want to be caught vulnerable in the environment that I grew up in. So even considering psychological health could be a sign of vulnerability
Mm,
that in the past my ego, my bravado would shrug off. Like I don't need I'm not dealing with anything. So it becomes very, very dangerous because ignoring your psychological health seems to be natural. Not giving any consideration to your emotional well-being or someone to express your emotions with, that's second nature as far as the environment that I grew up in. So it's very, very dangerous. So that's why I say sleeper agent. That's the first term that comes
mm.
up in my mind. It's one of those, it's like a Manchurian candidate. It's one of those things where you don't know it's so deadly until it's almost too late. So that's something that took years for me to break down that barrier and finally admit that I need help in this area.
Wow, wow. Michael, your thoughts?
For me, uh, I mean, I immediately go to mental health. When we talk about mental health, or when I think about mental health, I think about much to Isaiah's point, as a black man, I think about protection first. I got to protect myself, protect those that maybe around me, but more so protect myself. Don't allow myself to be vulnerable, but don't allow me to express, um, certain things, certain people. You might be vulnerable to people you're close with, you know, other guys maybe, but for the most part, make sure that that's protected. As I've gotten older, making sure that it's taken care of. Um, you know, going to see a psychiatrist, making sure that somebody is there to kind of help you, navigate or deal with certain things wasn't something that definitely wasn't promoted in my family, and so that's something I strive to teach my sons, or strive to impart them to my sons. But when we talk about it, I just think about mental health and the totality of from protection to care, to some of the negativities with it. Hiding, aggressions, hiding some things that you might hold inside for years and they come out in different ways. So it's all of that. So I think about all of those things when you mention that phrase, and how me. I always think about it from this standpoint, and Isaiah said it, but how me as a black man navigate that space, publicly and privately, because I think it's two things. Because I think publicly we try to put on a front, depending on the person or the people that we're in, but privately we might deal with it differently, and can ultimately do harm to ourselves, if not taken care of, if not treated, so forth and so on. So I just think of mental health.
Right, right. There's a pretty common connection actually in both those cases, and it's the experience of males in general, and in this country, certainly black men specifically. It's different, and that's what I would say about all health and safety related matters. That there is no cookie cutter approach that absolutely works for everybody. There and people have to get to be protected, to feel psychologically healthy and safe. It really depends on the person, what's going on in their life, the environment that they are in, not, sometimes what people say. It really is what they perceive and experience. And let's go back a little bit to both of you all's experience in the military. I'm sure that there were challenges, just being yourself, because again, my understanding of the military is they're going to bring you in and, some of this I saw in the movies anyway, but break you down and make you a soldier or an airman, or, or whatever it is, to make you in the mode that the military wants you to be. But some of those experiences of being made into, what the military wants you to be, some of that experience actually follows you as you leave and go into the workplace. So, Michael, could you talk a little bit about how your experience in the military, how it connected, and I'm not suggesting either positive or negative, but how did that experience of being in the military, how did that follow you as you got into the workforce in general?
Well, admittedly, I had no desire to join the Air Force. I had zero desire to join the Air Force. And it wasn't until later that I found out that a number of my family members, I mean, I have a rich history in our family with men who served in the armed forces. And one of the reasons I didn't want to go in, because I was focused so much more on my education. So things happened and I ended up joining the Air Force. And then I have an uncle, an uncle who's both of them are, well, one's a retired Marine, the other one was a retired Marine, but he killed himself. Mm-hmm. So I wanted no part of the Marines at all, like zero parts of the Marines, because I saw the effects of it as a young person that it had on my uncle, and how my uncle would like come home and put his weapon on the table and all that kind of stuff in front of us. It was just because that was who he was as a Marine. I'm always a Marine. I have cousins who retired from Marines, but because of how I grew up, I used to always say my father prepared me for the military, because he was strict, abusively strict. So when I joined the Air Force, again, as I said earlier, I'm an introvert. So I'm 6'4". I've been 6'4" since I was 14. So when I joined the Air Force, there's no hiding. So when you're in basic training, ain't no hiding. If you ain't in step, if you ain't doing what, there's no hiding. So it kind of prepared me for that, but then he didn't. So once I'll tell you, the proudest moment for me in the Air Force was when I first put on my blues, and we said we did the Star Spangled Banner was playing, and I was wearing my blues for the first time. Totally freaked me out, because like I said, I had no intention of going into the armed services. And then from that point on, it was like, I'm now committed to this thing. And then so fast forward, once I left the Air Force, my wife and I met at work, and she would tell you, she was like, I don't know if it's the military, I don't know if it's your radical background or whatever, but you were just lockstep, like a soldier kind of thing. This is how you act at work. You didn't smile much at work. You didn't, you weren't approachable. Everything was, kind of, and those were just, again, from childbirth through the military, and now in a regular job, those were just things that I carried. So for me, there wasn't so much of a big transition. Because it was who I was. So with certain things, I still make sure my gig line is straight. I still make sure I find myself when I take pictures that my hands are cuffed like this, like I'm standing at attention when I'm taking pictures. So all of that stuff carry on. And I've been out of the military a number of years, but I'm still doing that stuff even at 50 something. And I still find myself kind of programmed and took some of those things to the workplace. So for me, it wasn't that big of a transition, but some of the disciplines carried over, and people who I work with notice those disciplines. So
Sure, sure. Isaiah, how about you? That transition.
Well, I'm on the other side of that coin from Mr. Carson. For me, the training made the transition more difficult for me. It's something that I was ready to do. Before I took my oath, I did 8 years of training, 4 years in high school, 4 years in college. It was something that I was planning for, and I was planning on, being a full bird at least. I was planning on being a colonel. My entire plan was to be the next black general out of Tuskegee after Chappie James, General Daniel Chappie James. So, for one, me losing my flying career is such an abrupt. Sorry about this. Me losing my flying career in such an abrupt fashion, that devastated me. That broke my heart. And then at that point, I did have a choice. I could have transitioned to another field or medically retire. And at that point, I was so heartbroken. I said, I'll just go home. So being an officer in the military, your mental conditioning is different because, and I say this in no disrespect to enlisted, it's just, it's you're a soldier and you're also a leader. So there's another tier of responsibilities on top of combat. You're the man or woman that is giving orders. You're responsible for other lives, just like non-commissioned officers, like master sergeants, techs, chief master sergeants. So it's one of those things where you walk around with this rank on your shoulders. You're getting saluted. You're used to giving orders, taking orders as well. And then you come home and you take a regular job. And for one, I would be lying to say walking into a room and everyone's standing at attention, that does feel good. It is an amazing feeling. Me staying humble, I like to give myself credit. I never look down on anyone or anything of that sort. But it is an amazing feeling to get saluted and the greeting of the day as I gave to majors, lieutenant colonels, so forth. But coming home, and it's something I admittedly still struggle with to this day because I was used to being a leader. I was the top cadet in high school. I was the top cadet in college. That's how I got the pilot slot in the first place. You got to be selected. So I come home and now I'm just a regular guy. Mm-hmm. There's no more Captain Hughes. There's no more salutes or greetings of the day. There's no more mutual understanding of the mission at hand. Everything's a blur. And although I got love and affection from people knowing that I was a veteran, it was square one. A prime example, I had no idea how to write a resume. I never took time to even think about the art of writing a resume. And I had to learn that from scratch coming home from the Air Force. Because in my mind, why? OPR is the only thing I have to worry about. The proper formatting, and OPRs essentially write themselves. It's bullets, this many missions. So even the little things, learning how to write a resume, it was a tough transition. I have a militant approach to everything, which again is a blessing and a curse. And being militant and passionate can, I've been in some sticky situations where if I was raised differently or if I operated differently, I would have avoided those situations. But I enjoy the pressure of combat. And again, I'll say this is a blessing and a curse. So it's one of those things where a normal person who's used to a corporate lifestyle they know better than to ask this question or to make this statement in a meeting, I'm going to ask this question. What about this, sir?
Hmm.
And then it's just that awkward silence, like, oh wow, did he? Like, I'm like, I'm sorry, I just, this is wrong on slide 3, and it comes off as arrogant. So that was very tough, and figuring out what I wanted to do all over again was probably the biggest daunting task, and also what fed my depression because
Mm.
I had my full 20 years mapped out.
Mm.
I had it all mapped out, and being back at square one, having to transition into civilian life and figuring out all over again, what am I going to do? Because I can't fly commercial. My degree in political science isn't as important as I thought it was.
Mm.
Mr. Carson, I was going to be a JAG in the Air Force. So before I got selected to fly, my original dream was to be a JAG. I'm going to law school. I'm like, do I go to law school? You know, so it was a rough few years for me.
Mm.
Very, very rough.
And Dave, I came into the Air Force wanting to originally be a fireman, but I didn't have a driver's license at the time. So my second career was to be I wanted to be an attorney, but I ended up at 20 years old supporting the JAG as a paralegal with no experience, and my role was to prepare officers and non-commissioned officers to get ready to be kicked out and to be ready to be demoted.
Really?
That was my job. I sat and reviewed files that were 6 to 20 to 50 inches wide. I had to review those files and help her prepare to tell officers that you're no longer a captain anymore, or to tell a master sergeant you're no longer a master sergeant. You're now maybe a senior airman, or you have 6 chevrons. When you leave her office, you might have 2.
Wow.
On what your situation. So I sat at a desk. That was the first person they saw when they came in to see her, and I sat there well knowing how things were going to be once they left talking to me and talking to her. And once they came out, it was totally different. So that was my workplace experience for most of my Air Force career, was working. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of thrown in there. I was a 702 admin. And that's where just seeing, and then now I'm walking on a base, seeing people that were before me who were an officer or whatever, and now they're walking around maybe cleaning up or whatever before it was time for them to get out.
So
I just want to throw that in there.
well, both both of your experiences make me think about, and again, it doesn't appear like it's any different in the military or out, where these organizations bring people in and aren't necessarily as good as we think they are at preparing people for what they're about to drop them into. That's one thing. But on the other hand, they're also sometimes not as good as we think they are as at preparing them to leave that to go do something else. So there's challenges apparently on both ends. And I see that happening in the civilian workplace a lot. The concept of psychological safety is, do we have an environment where people can come and bring their whole self, be themselves, be who they are, and not have to worry about, somebody cutting side eye at you or somebody having an issue with you being yourself. That's the one hand. And the thing I talk about on this podcast more than anything else is the exposure to psychosocial hazards, which are factors, they're factors in the environment that you perceive or experience as a threat to you. They may not be to everybody else, but they are to you. And so just listening to both of your experiences, I hear a lot people talking about, oh yeah, God, we got to hire these veterans, got to get and I assume in some cases there's probably some kind of benefit to the hiring process, but do they do everything that is necessary to make sure when they bring that veteran in that they're creating a safe and healthy environment for that veteran from an emotional perspective, not just from a physical one, but from an emotional perspective? So share a little bit about, did, and Michael, we'll start with you on this one. Did people care how you felt when you went to work, or did they take that into consideration, or did they try to, embrace how you were feeling at work when when you first transitioned?
Well, I want to start out by saying this: all veterans aren't treated equally,
Okay.
not by, and they aren't viewed the same.
Okay.
And I recently had this conversation um, with someone who works for the VA. She's retired Army, and her job is to, make sure that veterans with disabilities are properly classified and they're able to get whatever the proper classification, whatever. And I would say, well, I don't have a disability. So it seems like because I don't have a disability, I'm not as valuable outside of the military as people with disabilities. Oddly enough, which is, it's like I even went to the VA and they were like, well, did you sneeze wrong in the Air Force and we can claim that you have X amount of, and I'm like, nah, not really. I wasn't in a war. So I'm not treated the same way as Officer Hughes because I don't have a certain, so from the public standpoint, they don't necessarily understand that. I don't believe they understand the differences. However, if you were to transition from the military to a government job, there's a difference because you're classified different. You get Officer Hughes will get hiring preferences that I won't get, even though we're both veterans, because of his he shared that he has a disability. So it's almost like the government or the federal government want you to have some type of disability from the Air Force, whatever it is. And they treat that person different. So for me, psychologically, over the years, I've had to deal with, am I really a veteran? I know I was served in the military, but am I really a veteran? Because I don't have any war wounds or I'm not part of Wounded Warriors. And yeah, it's nice to people do recognize. Over the years, I've received more recognition after and companies that I work for, they're like, oh man, we didn't know you were a veteran. Really talk about that. Tell us what that all was and how did you, and I always take it back to, the training I had and how it prepared me for the workplace and how it prepared me to lead and, different things. But yeah, so I always say all veterans aren't created equally, so to speak, or treated equally. And I think it really depends on the organization and the culture. But the government culture versus, and I'll even say this, civilian culture, because you have people who are government workers that, we had government workers that worked on the base that supported what we did. Under their code, that's a different culture than just an like I've worked in law firms and for corporations throughout my career. That culture is different from if I worked for a government culture or one that had government employees in it who were veterans. You would just be treated differently.
Sure.
So that's been my experience.
Sure. Sure. Isaiah, your thoughts?
Well, I want to say I have never stopped to ponder the social hierarchy amongst veterans. Mr. Carson, he makes a very, very good point. I've never thought about that. Me subconsciously, I've always shown gratitude whenever I go to the VA and I see the veterans who are amputees or who may have disabilities more severe than mine, because by the grace of God, I'm still able to live a somewhat normal life. I have epilepsy. So my body started, acting adversely to the conditions of flying on a frequent basis. So even though I'm a disabled veteran, whenever I go to the VA, and I see a veteran who has lost both of his legs, or a woman who uses two crutches on both of her hands to be able to walk from one appointment room to the next, I always take that as, gratitude. Well, thank you, Lord, for still giving me a semblance of normal life, quote unquote normal, um, after my service to this country. But I never thought about veterans who don't get their just recognition for their service, for the simple fact that they're not a disabled veteran, or if they served their 4 years and left in good health, and then it's kind of like a wave goodbye. And corporations obviously would take a preference over disabled veterans. It kills two birds with one stone. You have a military veteran and a disability act recipient and one employee. So I never really thought about that. So that puts things in perspective for me. As far as my transition in work, to be honest, I've had some awkward situations, and I've always had that veteran card where some people understood and some people didn't. So again, me being passionate, me being transparent, me used to being a leader, still am a leader, will continue to be a leader. I carry myself in a certain way. I speak in a certain way. And in the corporate world, it's, you find yourself in, you're back against the wall. So whenever I found myself in that situation, usually the veteran card was, well, he was a vet, he's a disabled vet. So he's used to doing things like this. And, I would either, I don't want to say get away with it. It was understood my intentions, or I would get pulled to the side, have a conversation. Well, this is not how we do things here, and so forth. I never found myself in a necessarily negative situation as far as being disciplined. Um, but I do find that I'm constantly in these situations as far as employment is concerned, because of the way that I carry myself and the way that I operate. It's something that I've grown to accept, that I'm going to find myself in certain situations, and I pray on, again, temperament and when to let things go, which hills to die on, which hills to walk past. So that's something that I task myself with personally, even though whether I'm right or wrong is irrelevant. Something I task myself with personally on: is this necessary? Is this course of action? Is this level of aggression necessary for this type of, for whatever the situation may be? Or can I simply let this go?
Sure.
So that's something that I continuously meditate over, is me checking myself and not using the veteran card, which I've seen, not using the veteran card to my advantage, to simply treat people or speak down on people because I used to wear a uniform. That's something that I'm very conscious of. And that's something that I've witnessed before. And it's something that I frankly find disgusting.
Right.
Dave, can I interject? And I know you're the host. And
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just thinking of something Captain Hughes said. Were you captain?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I was thinking about how, I don't know why this, and Dave, you know my background in working with men and women over the years who were incarcerated. I have a background in that, and also have a degree in political science and in criminal justice and sociology. But I was thinking about when Captain Hughes said how people will pull him to the side and not think of, like, this is not how we do things or whatever. For some reason, I thought of Morgan Freeman in the movie Shawshank Redemption. Remember when he got out of the movie, when he got out of prison and he was at the grocery store
Yes.
and he was like, got to go to the bathroom, boss, got to go take, and they're like, no, you don't have to ask me to go to the bathroom. You just go. And I was just thinking that while he served the country valiantly and gave his all for the country, it's almost like there were some things that were deposited that didn't give him everything back what he gave. It didn't give it all back to him, because then now he has to try to figure out, well, who earlier kind of what you said, who am I and what am I about outside of this space where you've programmed me to walk, talk, chew gum, do all of these things this way. And now I'm outside of here. And then I was thinking about myself, and even now in meetings, and how my aggressions come out like, are you guys hearing what I'm saying? This is just stupid. This doesn't even make sense. I was just thinking of that, it's like, are those a byproduct of that? Because it's like, don't you see that this doesn't make sense, or this is the way we should, or why are we spending time with this foolishness? This is this. So I just wanted to kind of, and those are just some of the things I was thinking about as he was speaking, and in my own experiences.
So and brilliantly, you're helping me make transition to where I really wanted to go for, really for the closing moments. We've got, a few more moments because, Captain Hughes, we want to make sure we get him off on his flight to go and serve in the new way he's serving. But I wanted you both to spend a little bit of time talking.
I'm good for another 10, Dr. Daniels. I hate to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I'm good for another 10, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that you all got the opportunity to share with folks out there who say, look, we want to bring veterans, we want to give them jobs, all that type of thing. Because interesting, particularly, Isaiah, something you said is that we have this fascination in this country with physical injuries, and we forget about the injuries that you cannot see. So yeah, if you lost an arm, lost a leg, blah, 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 we do all this stuff. But I say this again in the civilian world as well. There are a lot of people, we don't break their leg. We don't break their, we don't put them in a wheelchair. We don't take their eyesight or their hearing from them. Sometimes they do that as well. But what we do is we break them emotionally by all kinds of things about this workplace. This is supposed to be a workplace where people are supposed to come and do what they're told and not be who they are. And I think that's a part of the issue, is you bring people into the organization for a particular set of skills, for something that they're able to do, whatever that is, but it's like they have to leave their emotions outside. And it's not just, you all are examples because you're veterans, but you're not the only people who bring a story or a background or a history to the workplace. We all do, and they're all very different. So I wanted you, if you could talk to either it's a startup or a company, they want to bring some folks, particularly they want to bring veterans. What should they be doing? What should that experience be like? And Isaiah, we'll start with you. What if you, as a leader, if you were going to set this up to make that transition and make that just a really positive, what would that look like to you?
This is something that I care very much about. This is something that I have observed repeatedly in my many positions in the corporate world, even in nonprofit, for profit or nonprofit. I would like people to understand the difference between, and we've had a conversation about this, Dr. Daniels. I want people to understand the difference between leadership and management. There is a distinct difference between leadership and management. So veterans, for the most part, veterans are used to leadership. Military men and women, we're used to leadership. So our commanders are often, they're tenured, of course. That's a reflection of their rank, their position, their knowledge, their wisdom, their skill. But a part of that tenure is respect for their experience. And when they ask you to do something, it is something that they've already been doing for years, or they have no problem doing themselves at that very moment. They're just giving you an opportunity to gain experience for yourself. So one thing that I constantly battle with is people in leadership positions who are simply great managers. They don't know how to lead people, to get people to believe in the mission at hand, whatever the mission is. It could be sales goals, it could be a quota, whatever the case may be. And this was one of the greatest contributors to the great resignation during the pandemic. People got tired of their emotional stability being ignored for a monetary exchange. That transition was no longer viable. My work-life balance is more important than my salary. And if you can't respect that I need this time to spend with my children, or I need this time to better myself, then I'll find that balance someplace else. And the greatest way to alleviate that is being a leader. And being a part of being a leader, is spending time with your people, getting to know them, their ins and outs, their likes, their dislikes, what makes them tick. And you need to figure these things out, because being a leader, you can apply their likes and dislikes to the mission at hand and give them specific positions according to their own personal quirks. So what I've experienced repeatedly is, as you said, it's a one size fits all. Hey, here's this, get it done. We have a meeting at 5. Give me the debrief. And I have 5 questions, but you've already ended the meeting. So the meeting comes at 5, and it's like, well, why wasn't this done? Well, sir, step 2 and 3 are faulty. And I would have given you, I would have given you a debriefing, but you got off the meeting so fast, so you didn't complete it. Well, I could have, sir, but this, I would have ended up repeating it. So it's like working hard for the sake of working and not working smart. So that's something that emotional intelligence is very important, especially when it comes to veterans. I've had people have the audacity to ask me to cancel VA meetings. And I've had to remind them, like, hey, you know that this is federal law. There are labor laws in place where you cannot ask me to cancel my meeting, my medical appointment with the VA, to complete this task for the job. That is against federal law. Then they kind of give me a quirky look. And I'm like, hey, this is not a threat. I just want you to understand going forward that you don't bump across a veteran, who may take it to another level. I'm just saying this out of kindness. No, sir. No, ma'am. I will not cancel this appointment. And by law, you cannot punish me for attending this medical appointment. So it's one of those things that's very important. And I think emotional intelligence is important. That's a very big factor of leadership. Knowing what your people are going through, not just going through the motions every day. It's very important that leaders and program directors and regional managers, that they understand this about the men and women who fight for this country. We're used to a different type of structure, and we find solace in that structure. We find healing knowing that someone believes in what I'm working towards. So it's something that's very important.
Absolutely. Michael, your thoughts?
I don't have too much more to add. I'll just add. I won't say too much. Everything that Captain Hughes said, I think it's important also that if you're, again, an entity that don't work with individuals, work with veterans, that whomever's part of the hiring process, either read up on, study up on, go take some classes on something. How do we're gonna hire a veteran, or we're gonna have veterans as part of our team. What does that mean? It's hard for a veteran who to Captain Hughes, I wasn't a captain, but to be a captain in the Air Force and then come out and then you're working for some guy who just basically just, just kind of learned it. And he's now, or she's kind of in charge, and they have no, understanding of what this person as a veteran has gone through. You also got to hire and have people in place who respect the fact that you're a veteran. Not everybody respects the military. I mean, they just don't. You don't even have people that respect it who are Black, who look like us, who are men or women. They don't respect it for whatever reason. Could, social reasons that they have, their own personal beliefs. They don't respect it. They don't understand. They don't know what it means. But you got to understand that that person is coming to you with a certain set of values, principles, techniques, things that they've learned for how many ever years that they serve, that is really, if you do it right, elevates you and your team and your organization. But if you're not prepared to put him or her in a position to succeed, to help you succeed, then you can have those conflicts, you can have those battles. But I think it's important for you to do some kind of, whomever you are, to do some kind of work to find out what does that mean to have veterans on our staff, and not just the law, but what does it mean? How do we help to bring that person in a culture? You don't change your entire culture, but say, hey, this is somebody who's coming to this culture with some principles, values, and things that they've been taught, that if utilized properly and if we have those conversations, will benefit us as a team and benefit us as an organization. And that's been my experience with working in law firms with other veterans, attorneys who are veterans. We gel alike, we think alike, we kind of know how, because we have the conversation, we have the modus operandi, we know how this, kind of how we were trained to be. So I think that's important if you're an employer and you're seeking to hire veterans, but you got to respect it. You got to respect that person's a veteran, whether you served or not, and respect that they come in with a certain set of skill sets that might not even be written in the job description, but they'll benefit your team, your organization, if utilized properly.
Oh boy, respecting the time. Captain Hughes, I'd like you to just give us a couple of minutes before you have to go. Any closing thoughts you'd like to leave with the folks some will be listening. Most folks watch these videos on YouTube, but for those who might be either watching or listening, what's something you want to leave them with as you take your flight?
The most important lesson that I had to learn coming home is that, for one, the veterans who may be listening to this, life begins again. I know that's easier said than done. I myself, I suffered years of severe depression and anxiety. Many times I thought I had no purpose or something to offer to this earth. And so my first piece of advice is to understand that you're worth something. You're worth something. You're worth a lot. Excuse me, something is inappropriate. You're worth a lot. You have something to continue to live for, even outside of your military expertise. And even though your military expertise, even though they may not directly translate, like Mr. Carson said, there is a certain amount of invaluable skills that sometimes it can't be described with words. But you have skills and assets to be offered in all arenas of life. So I would like to encourage my brothers and sisters in arms in that aspect. For the potential employers, I think empathy is the biggest gift that you can give to that man or woman that you're hiring as a veteran. From understanding that they have sacrificed a piece of themselves, some physically, many more veterans, they sacrifice spiritually and emotionally. There are times I still have dreams of certain things that I heard and saw that, again, I've accepted. I may not ever get past that. And I've taken that, I've transformed that from a tool of torment to a badge of honor. I just take that with me, you know? So I would like the employers to, even if it's training or even if it's sitting down, having a conversation or coming back to platforms such as this and just hearing veterans speak of what these men and women go through on a daily basis. For me, my affliction, I'll tell you, I share this with you. So actually going to the VA was traumatizing for me because, for one, I look so young, and two, my disability isn't physical. There's nothing to signify my sacrifice for my country. So I would walk in there and I would just get stared at by the older gentleman.
Mm.
And I was like, what you doing in here, young blood? So I'm a veteran, sir. You a veteran? Yes, sir. What did you do? Oh, I flew in the Air Force. You were a pilot? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I flew AWACS. Then what happened? I've got epilepsy. Epilepsy. And it's one of those things where it seems like many times they thought I was someone's grandson. And it's one of those things where even if you're about to onboard this employee that's a veteran, take time to sit down and have a conversation with him or her, whether it be a dinner or a luncheon, and just a simple hour conversation to understand who they are, what they are about, and check in with them. And then that is going back to my previous statement. That is building a relationship, and that is a leadership trait. Because if this veteran, if they feel that they're being taken advantage of, for many veterans being taken advantage of again,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to send them deeper into a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So love and empathy is very, very important. More now in the workplace than ever before. Work has been completely transformed, it's been revolutionized. And so empathy and understanding is probably the most valuable thing that you can do in onboarding a veteran besides the compensation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But taking time to get to know him or her, their previous experiences and what they're looking to accomplish at your corporation and your division, etc. That's going to pay you back dividends far beyond the literal compensation of his or her salary. That return on investment, the commitment from that veteran is going to bring you an ROI much greater than the salary, much greater. All it takes is a little bit of understanding, showing them that you care. And like you said, Dr. Daniels, that you appreciate their sacrifice. Same thing with Mr. Carson said, for them to understand that it is appreciated at their workplace. It gives a feeling that's indescribable. Keeps you going in a tough time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Carson.
Yeah, I can only just add just a little bit to that because he said it. Captain Hughes said a lot, and all of it very valuable and important. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning: protect here. Protect your peace as a Black man, as a Black veteran. That's a whole nother topic, but protect that as best you can, and make sure you get the care. Not only if you're with an employer, find out if they have a EAP program. Find out so that you can get whatever necessary care you have through not only the VA, but through your employer. And employers or people who are entrepreneurs and looking to hire veterans, throw out the job description when it comes to veterans. Just throw out the job description. And I mean, not deviate from it completely, but like, look, this is who we're bringing on board. This is who I'm bringing on board. And really, really find out not only how that person can, again, enhance the team and enhance the vision or the mission of your organization, but find out who that person is and what not only the sacrifices they made, but what do they bring to the table that you don't have on your job. Like sit down and listen, learn, write, take some notes down that could possibly help you as you continue to hire more veterans. It's like, oh, okay, these are some of the things. And then if you have a veteran on your staff, make sure they're part of the onboarding to bring on other veterans, because he or she could see or be able to ask questions and to know things and to say, hey, yeah, this person is right. Because they're a veteran doesn't mean that they're going to be a perfect fit. It doesn't mean that they're going to be somebody you don't want to hire, but you want to make sure that you have all of everything you can in your arsenal so that you're be able to make an informed decision, especially when you don't have the history, the background, and knowledge, and you really don't understand. So bring some people on, as part of the onboarding process who are veterans and could give you those insights and kind of help you identify people who can best fit the culture. So, but yeah, protect yourself, make sure you get the care, and make sure you treat the people that's before you that you're bringing on board with the utmost respect, because it's going to be the square that you're trying to fit in that circle. It'll fit if you shave off the edges and get to kind of, it'll fit, but you got to be willing to make it fit and make it fit such that it not only benefits you, but benefits the person that you bring on board because you understand who they are and their experience as a veteran.
Well, again, I just want to thank both of you. First of all, for your service to our country. I want to thank both of you for your service to our communities, because both of you have contributed, even at the local community after you left your military service, have served the people closest to you. And I absolutely honor what you all have done and what you shared with us. This has been a very unique Psych Health and Safety USA podcast because it's a topic that we've not talked about before, but I couldn't think of two better people to talk about it. So until next time, those who are following, we'll see you each week, wherever you get your podcast. Happy Veterans Day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. To stay up to date with the best content on workplace mental health in America, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and join the Flourish DX community at www.flourishdx.com.